The sun was setting behind the hills when John, a quiet farmer on the edge of Earth's outer colony, walked back toward his small house. The air smelled of dry soil and wheat. His fields were half harvested, and his arms were sore from a long day of work. He wiped sweat from his brow and was about to lock the main gate when he heard a soft knock. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't loud, almost like someone was afraid to knock too hard. John paused. Few people ever came this far. His farm was far from the town. He slowly opened the wooden gate and stepped outside. There, standing in the dust, was a strange figure, a young alien girl. She had pale gray skin with glowing blue marks along her neck. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly golden in the fading light. She wore a torn, dirty cloth over her shoulders. But what truly caught John's eye were the two small alien children clinging to her legs. They looked thinner than scarecrows, their cheeks hollow, their eyes tired and scared. The girl's voice shook when she spoke. "Please, don't be afraid," she said. "I'm not here to steal." John didn't speak. She took a deep breath. "I'll work," she said. "Any job, farming, cleaning, digging, anything. Just, please, feed my children." Her hands were trembling. Her knees looked like they might give out at any moment. John looked at her, then at the children. One of them looked barely able to stand. He stepped aside and opened the gate wider. "Come in." Inside the house, he lit a fire and placed an old kettle on the stove. The alien children sat close to each other, shaking. The girl sat near the door, ready to run if she had to. He served them warm soup, nothing fancy, just broth and soft vegetables. The children grabbed the bowls with both hands, like they'd never seen food before. They ate fast, tears running down their faces. John placed a second bowl in front of the alien girl. She didn't touch it. He raised an eyebrow. "You're not hungry?" She lowered her eyes. "I'll eat after I finish the work." "There is no work," John said. "Eat." Still, she didn't move. John sighed, stood, and handed her a spoon. "Eat while it's hot." She hesitated, then finally took it. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, John gave them old blankets and laid them near the fire. He pointed to a corner of the room. "You can rest there. You'll be safe." The children were already curled up, asleep. But the alien girl didn't lie down. She sat up, legs folded, eyes open. Watching, guarding, John noticed. "You're not going to sleep?" She shook her head. "I can't. Not yet." "You think I'll hurt them?" She didn't answer. He didn't push. He just walked to the other side of the room, placed his old hat on the hook, and sat in his wooden chair. "I'm not like the ones who made you afraid," he said softly. She looked at him. Her lips trembled. "That's what they all say." John nodded slowly. "Then I won't say it again. I'll just show you." Hours passed. John dozed off in his chair. The alien girl remained still. But when she saw the children sleeping peacefully, when she felt the fire's warmth, when she realized the man across the room had not moved from his chair, she finally closed her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, she slept. Morning light spilled through the small window of the farmhouse. John stood outside feeding the chickens. His hands moved slow and steady, but his thoughts were still on the girl and her children inside. She had come from nowhere. Desperate, quiet, proud. He'd seen that look before. People who had nothing left but still tried to keep their dignity. When he stepped back into the house, he saw her standing near the stove. She had cleaned the floor, folded the blankets, washed the bowls they had used, and now she stood silently waiting. "I told you to rest," he said. She shook her head. "I said I would work." "You weren't lying," John muttered. She stepped aside and pointed to the corner where the children still slept, curled under the blanket. "I didn't wake them. They were cold and tired." John nodded. He pulled out some flour, oil, and dried herbs from a small cupboard. "You ever made flatbread?" he asked. The alien girl hesitated. "No, but I can learn." "Good," he said. "Let's make breakfast." She watched every movement he made. How he kneaded the dough, how he shaped it, how he turned it over a warm pan until it was golden brown. "Now you try," he said, handing her some dough. Her fingers were unsure. She pressed too hard at first, then too soft. But after 3 tries, she made something close enough to pass. He didn't laugh. He didn't mock her. He just nodded. Not bad. When the smell filled the cabin, the 2 alien children woke up slowly. Their noses twitched. Their eyes widened. The girl handed them warm pieces of bread wrapped in a cloth. They grabbed the food like it might vanish, then looked at her as if waiting for permission. She smiled softly and nodded. They ate quickly, but not like before, not like desperate creatures. This time they chewed slowly, carefully. It was the first real meal they'd had in weeks. John placed his hand on the table. "You got a name?" The alien girl looked down. After a moment she said, "My people called me Sina, but it's hard for humans to say." John shrugged. "Then I'll try." She looked up, surprised. "I'm not afraid of your name," he added, "and I won't change it just to make myself comfortable." Sina looked at him differently now, not as a threat, but maybe, just maybe, as someone real. After breakfast, she stood and asked, "What can I do today?" John pointed outside. "You can help me clean the tool shed." Without another word, she followed him out. She worked with her sleeves rolled up, quiet and focused. Her hands were fast, her back strong. She didn't complain, even when splinters cut her fingers or dust filled her lungs. John watched her closely. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he saw something in her, something familiar, a fire that had refused to go out. At noon, he handed her water. She drank with both hands, then handed it back with a bow. "You don't need to bow," he said. "It's respect," she replied. "Where I come from, we bowed to those who didn't hurt us." John frowned. That sounds like a place where kindness was rare. She didn't reply. By the time the sun dipped low again, the shed was clean. The children had played quietly with sticks and stones outside. Sina had kept an eye on them the entire time, never letting them wander far. That evening, John served stew made from old vegetables and dried meat. It wasn't much, but to Sina and her children, it was a feast. Later, after the children had fallen asleep again, she stood at the door and looked out at the stars. John sat on the porch beside her. "You don't say much," he said. "I spoke too much before," she replied. "It got me hurt." He didn't press her, just nodded. Then after a moment she asked, "Why are you doing this?" He shrugged. "Maybe I'm just tired of seeing good people broken." She looked at him, really looked. "I don't have anything to offer but work." John turned to her. "You offered your word, you kept it. That's more than most." She looked at the cabin behind her, then at the stars, then at him, and for the first time since arriving, she smiled. Just a little, but it was real. Night came early that day. Clouds rolled over the sky and covered the stars. The wind whispered through the fields, brushing the long grass like fingers searching for secrets. Inside the farmhouse, the fire crackled softly. The 2 alien children were asleep, curled together under a thick blanket. John sat at the table, sipping hot tea. Sienna stood by the window. She hadn't spoken much all day. She worked harder than usual, cleaning, cooking, even fixing one of the broken fence boards. She moved like a machine, but John could see the tension in her shoulders. Something was building inside her, and tonight it was going to come out. "You don't rest," John said quietly. "Even when I tell you to." Sina didn't turn. "I can't afford rest," she replied. "Why not? You and the kids are safe here." She was silent. He continued. "They're not starving anymore. No one's chasing you here. You can slow down." Her hand tightened on the window frame. "That's what I thought once before," she whispered, "and I was wrong." John didn't say anything. He waited. Finally, she turned around. Her eyes weren't glowing like before. They looked tired, heavy. "Do you want to know the truth?" she asked. John nodded slowly. Only if you want to. Tell it. Sina sat down across from him at the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them. I was born on a trade moon, she began. Not much light. No grass. Just machines and buyers. My parents sold scrap. When I was 15, they sold me. John's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. I worked in kitchens. Factories. Later. In places where no one asked for your name. Just your body. Her voice didn't shake. She had told this to herself so many times. It had become a cold practice tale. I escaped twice. Got caught both times. The third time, I ran far enough that they stopped looking. I found the children in a cage. Starving. Left behind. I took them. You don't even know them? John asked gently. Sina shook her head. No. But they looked like I did. So I didn't ask questions. I just took them. John stared at her. You're not their mother. But you became one. Sina's throat moved. I didn't want them to feel the kind of silence I did when I was alone. The kind that makes you feel like you'll vanish if no one speaks your name. The fire popped gently beside them. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then John leaned forward. They ever thank you? Sina smiled faintly. Children don't need to. I see it when they sleep and don't wake up screaming. John nodded. That's how I knew they trusted you. They sleep like they belong. She looked at him, something soft in her eyes. Do you think someone like me deserves to belong? John didn't blink. I think someone like you earned it. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected kindness. She hadn't expected belief. A log shifted in the fire. Sina stood and walked over to it, poking the flames gently with a stick. People think aliens don't feel things the way humans do, she said. They're wrong. I don't, John said. She looked back. Don't what? I don't think you're less than human. I think you're more than most. Tears filled her eyes. But they didn't fall. She had trained herself too long to hold them back, but one slipped free. Anyway, she wiped it quickly, embarrassed. I've lived like a shadow for so long, she whispered. Sometimes I forget I'm still real. John stood and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You're not a shadow here, Sina. You're seen. Later that night, Sina lay down near the children. She held them both close, her arms wrapped tightly around them. Not because they were in danger now, but because she remembered what it felt like to be alone in the dark, and this time she wouldn't let that happen to them, or to herself. Not again. 3 days passed. The routine became peaceful, almost like a real family. Sina cooked, cleaned, helped in the fields. The children played with sticks and helped gather eggs. John smiled more than he had in years, but peace doesn't last long in small towns. Not when people start talking. It began when John went into the nearby village for supplies. He entered the general store, like always. But the room grew quiet the moment he stepped in. 2 men stood near the counter, whispering. One turned and stared. You've got someone on your land, he said. John didn't respond. A woman, the other added. Not human. John placed a sack of grain on the table. Is there a problem? The storekeeper sighed. People are worried, John. She doesn't belong here. She's not hurting anyone, John said calmly. She's an alien, the first man snapped. How long before she steals something? Brings others? John's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't explain. He just picked up his supplies and left. That night, Sina saw his face when he returned. What happened? She asked. Nothing I didn't expect, he muttered. She was silent. Then she said, They know about me. He nodded. You should send me away. John looked at her sharply. Why? Because I don't want to make your life harder. You didn't make my life harder, he said. You made it better. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. Still, people talk. They always talk. And then they act. John stepped closer. Let them. The next day, a stranger came to the gate, a large man with a red scarf and two others behind him. All three stared at the farmhouse like it didn't belong. John met them at the gate. "We heard you're housing some outsiders," the leader said. John folded his arms. "My land. My business. Your land's part of this village, and we don't like strangers hiding things." John's voice grew cold. "She's not hiding. I invited her. You're protecting one of them." The man spat at the ground. "After all they've done? They nearly destroyed our colony 10 years ago. She wasn't part of that. Doesn't matter, she's one of them." "She's raising children," John said. "She's working harder than anyone here. She saved 2 lives. That counts for something." The man shook his head. "You're making a mistake." "No," John said. "You are. If you come back here to threaten her again, I'll make sure you don't come back at all." The men glared but left. Sheena watched it all from inside, holding her breath. That night, John found her sitting on the porch holding the smallest child in her arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what? For bringing you trouble?" John sat beside her. "I lived alone before you came," he said. "Not peaceful. Just empty. You didn't bring trouble. You brought life." She stared at the stars. "I was taught to keep my head down, to not speak unless spoken to accept shame instead of fighting it." John looked at her. "What do you want to teach them?" He nodded toward the children. She was quiet, then said, "That they can raise their heads. That they have worth. That they can grow where they were once left to rot." "Then stay," John said, "and do that right here." The next day, someone threw a rock through the farmhouse window. The children screamed. Sienna pulled them close, shielding them. John rushed outside but saw no one, just footprints in the dirt. He fixed the window silently. Sienna looked at him. "You still want us here?" "Yes," he said without hesitation, "but now they'll never stop." John touched her shoulder gently. "Then we won't stop either." Later that evening, as the children slept, Sienna stood outside again. The air was cool. The sky was clear. John joined her. "You're not afraid?" she asked. "I've faced storms before," he replied. "You don't run from them, you stand your ground." She looked up at him. "Even if it's for someone like me?" He nodded. "Especially then." The sky turned dark before noon. Thick clouds rolled across the hills, swallowing the sun. The wind came first, strong, sharp, bending the trees and pushing dust into the air. John stood on the porch, eyes narrowed at the horizon. "That's not just rain," he muttered. Sheena came up beside him, holding one child on her hip, the other clinging to her leg. "Storm?" He nodded. "Big one. The kind that floods fields and rips roofs." He looked at his crops. Dozens of rows ready, to be harvested, his whole season's work. And if this storm hit hard, everything would be lost. Sienna saw the fear in his eyes. She turned to the children. "Inside. Now." They obeyed, running inside without a word. John stepped down from the porch, moving toward the field. "I need to dig water channels, divert it before it soaks everything." "You'll never finish in time," she said. "I have to try." He picked up his shovel and ran toward the wheat. The wind grew louder. The first drops fell, cold, fast, heavy. John dug fast, but the earth was already turning to mud. His hands slipped. The wind knocked his hat off. Rain hit like stones now. Sienna appeared beside him, grabbing another shovel. "What are you doing?" he shouted over the storm. "I said I would work," she shouted back. He was about to argue, but her eyes were fierce. She didn't wait for permission. She dug. Together they dug deep lines across the edges of the field. Water started running away from the roots instead of drowning them. She moved like fire. Fast, steady, without pause. The rain soaked her hair. Mud clung to her legs. Her arms bled where stones cut her skin. But she didn't stop. John stumbled, once his leg cramping. She grabbed him with one hand, held him up, and said, "Don't fall now. We're not done." By the time the worst of the storm passed, the sun had nearly vanished behind the hills. They stood covered in mud, shivering, and breathless, but the field had survived. The wheat was bent but not ruined. The earth was wet, but not washed away. Sheena dropped to her knees and laughed, a tired, shaky laugh. John sat beside her, too exhausted to speak. They returned to the house in silence. Inside, the children ran to Sheena, hugging her wet legs. John sat at the table and wiped his face with a towel. His hands ached, his back throbbed, but he smiled. "You saved the crops," he said. Sheena shook her head. "We saved them." "No," he said firmly. "You did." The next morning the village arrived, not with rocks, not with anger, but with curiosity. People had seen them working through the storm. A few had watched from a distance as the alien girl threw herself into the mud to protect a field that wasn't even hers. Old Merrick, the miller, stepped forward. "You lost less than the rest of us." John nodded. "Because she worked through the storm." He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. They knew who. A woman with sharp eyes whispered, "She saved this farm?" John nodded again. While others watched, Sheena stayed inside, peeking through the curtain. She didn't trust the change. Not yet. Later, a soft knock came at the door. Sheena opened it. A young boy stood there holding a bundle. His mother stood behind him. "These are dry clothes," she said. "We saw what you did. Thank you." Sheena didn't speak, just took the clothes with shaking hands. Another woman brought soup. An old man left tools on the porch. The same people who once whispered were now trying, slowly, to understand. That night, Sheena sat by the fire, her legs wrapped in bandages, her hands still sore. John handed her a cup of tea. "You didn't have to do it," he said. She looked at him, her voice soft. "I did. This land gave me food, gave my children peace. It gave me you." He looked down at his cup, not speaking. She smiled. "It was the first place that didn't ask me to be less, so I gave it everything I had." Outside, the field stood tall in the moonlight, and for the first time, the village saw her not as a burden, but as one of their own. The rain had passed. The sky was blue again, and the wind carried the scent of wet earth and growing crops. John's field, once feared to be lost, stood proudly, green, strong, and alive. It was the only one in the area that survived the storm, not because of luck, because of her. Sheena sat outside on the porch, a cloth wrapped around her hands where the shovel had torn her skin. Her legs still hurt, but she didn't complain. She watched her children chase each other in the grass. They laughed now, real laughter, not the quiet, scared sounds they used to make. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were living. She turned her head as footsteps approached. John came up beside her, holding a wooden box. Inside were nails, a hammer, and sandpaper. "What's that for?" she asked. He pointed to the old fence. "I thought we'd build something new. Together." She smiled. "Something that lasts?" He nodded. "Like you." As they began working, someone appeared at the gate. It was Merrick, the old miller, with a sack of flour on his back. John stepped forward, cautious, but Merrick raised one hand. "This is a gift, for her, and her children." Sheena looked up from the fence. "Why?" Merrick placed the sack down slowly. "Because I was wrong." She blinked. "I said things, thought things, ugly things, but I saw what you did. No one else ran into that field. You did. For a man who didn't owe you anything." He looked down at the ground. "I wanted to say, thank you, and I'm sorry." Sheena stood slowly. She stepped forward, and she bowed. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me." Later that day, others came too. A woman brought new shoes for the children. Another came with seeds and cloth for curtains. One of the men who had once thrown the rock through their window came and stood silently, holding a wooden toy. He said nothing, just left it on the porch and walked away. Sheena's eyes filled with tears, not because of pain but because of acceptance. That evening, she sat on the porch steps, watching the sky turn orange. John sat beside her, sipping warm tea. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "People do notice, maybe not at first, but they remember kindness." John nodded. "And strength. You showed them both." She looked down at her hands. "I used to think I had to prove myself to be useful, to earn every breath." "You've earned more than that," he said. "You've earned a place." The children came running up the steps, both of them holding small bundles of wildflowers. "For you, Mama," the younger one said. Sheena's breath caught. She took the flowers in her hands, smiling so wide it almost hurt. "Thank you," she whispered. They ran off again, laughing and chasing each other in the tall grass. John looked at her. "They're healing too." She nodded. "Because of here. Because of you." He looked out at the land. "You're part of this now, Sina. This farm. This life. It's not just mine anymore." She turned to him. "It feels like the first time something fits." He smiled gently. "Then let's keep building it." That night she stood at the window, watching the moonlight spill across the field. Her children slept peacefully nearby. She held the wooden toy the man had left. The same man who once hated her. It was carved carefully, a little alien girl holding a flower. Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time they didn't come from sadness. They came from belonging. The sun was warm. The earth smelled fresh and birds sang from the trees. The children laughed as they picked wild berries near the fence. Sheena stood in the field, her hands on her hips, eyes on the wheat swaying in the wind. A light breeze ran through her silver hair. This place no longer felt borrowed. It felt like home. John walked up behind her, wiping sweat from his brow. "The soil's holding," he said. "We'll have a good harvest." She nodded. "We." He smiled. "That's right. We." She turned to him. "You say it like I've always belonged." "You have," he replied. The land just took a little time to agree. She laughed, softly. It was real, clear and unafraid. Later that evening, after the children were fed and sleeping, John asked her to come sit on the porch. The sky was painted orange and pink. Stars were just beginning to appear. He held something in his hand, small and wrapped in cloth. Sina sat beside him, curious. "What's that?" she asked. He placed it in her hand gently. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a folded paper. Indeed, her eyes widened. She looked at him in shock. This is land." John nodded. "I had it split. One section is now yours. Official. Legal." Her hands shook. "Why would you do this?" He didn't look away. "Because this land grew stronger with you on it. Because my life grew brighter with you in it. Because your children made this house feel alive again. Because no one should live waiting to be kicked out." Her breath caught. "And," he added softly, "because I want you to stay. Not because you have nowhere to go, but because you choose to." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I came to your gate with nothing," she whispered. "Not even hope. You had 2 children and your word," he said. "That's everything." She stared at the deed, still not believing it. "I used to give everything I had just to survive one more day." "You're not surviving now," John said. "You're living, and you deserve to live with something that's yours." Her voice cracked. "No one's ever given me anything without asking for something in return." "I don't want payment," he said. "I want partnership." She stood up slowly, looking at the stars above, then down at the land around her. Everything felt different, not because it changed, but because she had. The next morning, the village gathered for market day. John stood beside Sina as she brought fresh herbs and wild berries to trade. People greeted her by name. The children played with others. A woman asked her for help stitching a torn jacket. Another offered her a basket of bread in return for her advice on soil. She smiled, confident, grounded. Later, as they walked back to the farm, John looked over at her. "I have one more offer," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "More land?" He chuckled. No, just a simple question. He stopped, then faced her. I know this isn't the life you dreamed of, but would you share it with me? She blinked. He continued. Not as a worker, not as a guest, as family. My wife. Her mouth parted, her eyes softened. You still want me? After all my past? I don't want the past, he said. I want you, the woman who saved my crops, who raised children without a name, who brought love back into this place. Sana looked at him. Then she looked at the children playing in the grass. Then she looked at the land. Hers now too, and she said softly, Yes. That evening, under the stars, Sina held her children close and whispered, We came here, asking for food, we gave work, but we found everything we never knew we deserved. And when she lay down beside the man who once opened a gate to her, she finally closed her eyes in peace. Not a guest, not a servant, not a shadow, but as a wife, as a mother, as a woman with a name and a home.